slaves and so forth. And I just want to take this time to say that publicly to you, Brother Darryl.
You're very kind.
Read your religion. We're talking about sides, very courageous young people. People like Ashley Yates, who's one of the grand young leaders, who was a product of freedom schools that were founded by Marion Wright Edelman, who's one of the great prophetic voices connected to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. You all know her her Children's Defense Fund. She's been at it now for almost 40 years. Or people like Tef Poe, who's a hip-hop artist, who is a courageous visionary. Alexis Templeton was alongside me, because I think as an old school brother, it's very important that we first let young people know that we love them, we're concerned about them, we attend to them. But secondly, that they come from a great tradition, that sense of subversive memory. So we had long discussions about Ella Baker. Ella Baker, the great grassroots leader, executive director, SCLC, and SNCC at the same time. For them to be able to engage Ella in this particular moment. Of course, they're dealing with what black folk have been up against for 400 years, which is being terrorized, traumatized, and stigmatized. Arbitrary policing. And it's just, for me, it's sublime to see people stand up in the face of power and send ripples so people can maybe shatter their sleepwalking, even if only for a moment. Become awakened, willing to that request. But as we know, this is systemic. Every 28 hours, a young black brother or sister is shot by the police or some vigilante tied to authorities. This is systemic. Eric Gardner, New York, Kenneth Chamberlain, White Plains, Clinton Allen, Dallas. We go on and on. Oscar Grant, Oakland, on and on and on. So I was just blessed to be there. I was blessed to get arrested and go to jail. We had deep dialogues in jail. And I'm always open to singing some Motown songs.
It's not Peter, Paul, and Mary anymore?
No. But the important thing is to remain engaged. They're still at it now for 70-some days. This is unprecedented in the last 20 years. Young folk organizing for over 70-some days every day. They are on fire. And it's spilling over. Both participation within the electoral political system, but also bringing power and pressure to bear it out. Today is also, of course, the day that me and Brother Carl Dix had called for some kind of massive resistance, stop hyper-incarceration. And a number of different activities took place today. I was on the run, but it's part and parcel. Carl Dix also was there with me and arrested. He's my very dear brother. But it's part and parcel of what I hope is an awakening. And that cuts across color and culture. And it even cuts across class. Even some of our well-to-do fellow citizens are recognizing that callousness and indifference toward poor and working people has blowback. You end up reaping what you sow. But that's the beginning of an answer.
I mean, when we talk about, say, stop and frisk in New York and 600,000 incidents of it last year, that's not 600,000 kids stopped. That's the same kids stopped over and over again. So do you think it drives the young people of color away from more participation in the process, or has now these incidents kind of built in such a way that they see the importance of actually, say, voting? Martin Luther King said a long time ago, it's not that the danger isn't just that whites keep you from the polls, it's the political suicide of not going to the polls yourself. The electoral process also part of this new activism.
I mean, I discern a kind of openness or political maturity on behalf of the young brothers and sisters. So for them, it's either or. I think they're going to vote, but the Temple said, I voted for Obama twice and still got tear gas. And of course, what he's talking about is not arguing against voting, but recognizing that voting has its limits, especially when it comes to arbitrary police power or massive unemployment or decrepit school systems and so forth. That it can make a difference, but it won't make the difference. And I think that is mature, because you don't want to lie to people and tell them that just voting somehow is going to generate the kind of fundamental change that's required to address the kind of plights and predicaments that people are wrestling with.
Well, I think people like me are somewhat guilty. I mean, I sat far away and kind of expatriate, having a good time, and cast my absentee ballot every 4 years and thought I'm a really good American. But actually, it's the unglamorous stuff that we need people to show up for, including the midterms. And so these stories in the Times are these white police departments in these towns that have these new black majorities. And it's because blacks are not yet voting in these towns and joining the city councils that hire these people. But it's sort of time that we do again. Because it's made a difference where black voters have.
No, I think that's true. But the other side of it is that you were saying your blessed sister lived in Billie Holiday's city, Baltimore.
Yes.
You can take a city like Baltimore, which has been a chocolate city for a good while now. And there's a lot of chocolate police. And you still have police brutality across the board. Because it's a culture. And once you get socialized into the culture of the police that allows you to get away, given that there's no strong accountability of mistreating folk, especially poor black, precious poor black people, then at that point it's not just a matter of having black police.
No.
Now, and I'm not against that. I think it is better to have black police and white police, but it's a structural, institutional, and cultural question, or at least culture within those structures and institutions, that present a real problem. There has to be some accountability. You got to start sending to jail police who kill innocent citizens. There's no way around it. It's like Wall Street. You got to send Wall Street criminals to jail when they commit crimes, market manipulation, insider trading, fraudulent activity, and so forth. If they torture, you got to send the torturers to jail. The president said they're real patriots. They're not real patriots. Torturers are thugs. I don't care who they are. They're gangsters. Torture is a crime against humanity. So you don't just let them free. But then when Letitia and Jamal get caught with a crack bag, you send them straight to the new Jim Crow. See, at that point, the criminal justice system itself is criminal. And it loses its legitimacy. And understandably so. Because it's so tilted against poor people. And tilted against disproportionately chocolate poor people, black, brown, red, and so on. These are white poor also.
Did you sense any shift under Holder in this kind of cultural justice?
There were some gestures, sentencing that he pushed through 2010. It took a while. We put pressure on him immediately. We didn't get any bully pulpit treatment from our brother president to try to awaken the nation. How can you have a system that's quadrupled and over 61% of them are for soft drugs? The difference, murder and rape is for soft drugs. The intake among black youth, 12% intake, among white youth, 12%, 65% conviction. The use of presidential power. You see, when it comes to keeping track of Brother James Rising, he's quite willing to use executive power to keep track of it. He's about to push him into jail. See, when it comes to assassinating 4 American citizens without due process or judicial review, he's pretty tied to the imperial presidency that goes all the way back to earlier presidency after World War II. So that there's uses of presidential power that tilt toward kinds of questions, I think, that need to be raised. I mean, even in regard to Ferguson, the young folk are very aware that the massive transfer of the most sophisticated weaponry took place in the last 5 years. They knew what was going on. This was under Brother Eric Holder too. And 8 of the Black Congressional Caucus voted against it. All the rest of them were for it. But this is in the shadows, behind the scene. That's what it is to be part of a neoliberal regime that's tied with 3 tendencies: financialize, privatize, militarize. And it disproportionately affects the weak and vulnerable. Financialize, 1% of the population own 42% of the wealth. Big banks dominate. They don't produce products, they produce deals. Very different than the earlier versions of capitalism. American Motors at least produce products with workers. Hedge fund and others, they don't produce anything other than just making money.
This is going to be, though, the new sort of white-collar, blue-collar job of the future, data farming. It's going to be like the German Democratic Republic, where overemployment was in the secret security, watching everybody else. They collect all this data, we don't care now because they can't process it. But if they start hiring people to sit there and go through it, it's a different world. But all these things, it's almost by inertia. You know, it's like prisons are such big business, or the war on drugs is such big business, that dismantling a whole sort of system that's grown up to absorb this federal money.
Well, Radio Hanoi, that's what the New York Times said after Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous speech on April 4th, 1967. That's the liberal newspaper. You can imagine what the right wing was saying. Why? Because it was a critique of American empire, critique of Vietnam, and all he was saying was that Vietnamese babies are as precious as babies in America. And see, this is part of what needs to be said by highly visible leaders, spokespersons. Black girls and boys has exactly the same status as the lives of white boys and girls at Exeter and Andover. It's just a basic moral, and I would say as a Christian, a spiritual statement. And it needs to be said over and over again, and our policy needs to reflect that. The reason why the culture, the police is exactly what you're talking about, and you had the courage to stand up, is because when there's no accountability, there's no answerability, there's no responsibility, they do it over and over and over and over and over again. It becomes routinized.
Arrogance of power.
Absolutely, and it's something I think it's inside of all of us.
Insulation against accountability.
You say what?
Insulation against accountability.
Absolutely. Act with impunity. And come up with mechanisms to ensure there's no accountability ever.
Is there a kind of unspoken thing in the general population that's behind the police because they...
What would be the response of the nation? It'd be like Newtown, Connecticut. All hell break loose, town meetings everywhere. And in terms of black leadership, if this were happening among the black upper middle class youth, as opposed to black poor youth, you have different kind of black leadership. But even the black middle class has become too indifferent to the plight of black poor youth. And they understand that. They feel that. That was part of the meeting that took place that Sunday night when they took over the meeting.
I don't know if that's entirely true, but I know...
But I mean, it's too pervasive in that sense. But of course you've got some black
I remember...
class folk concerned, but you have different kind of black leaders. Even the churches will have stronger prison ministries and prevention rather than building funds, and the pastors with CEOs with their Bentleys.
Yes, but we've had a lot of examples recently that show that police don't care if you have a Phi Beta Kappa key, just as in the past they never cared. I remember one of his classmates from Hawaii said that, you know, in Hawaii everyone's a mongrel. It didn't sort of make any difference. But once Obama got to LA and the cops there treated him as a black youth, then he understood what his mother had been trying to tell him all those years.
Oh, it's monopolizing and the corporatizing that takes place. In the music industry, just a few companies own recording, radio, and video, and live performance. So you're going to end up with certain kind of products. In the book publishing world, struggles over Amazon. Corporation that becomes, that moves toward monopoly, that makes it difficult for Strand, court books. I was just in court books in Brooklyn. This is part of the structural institutional tendencies of highly financialized monopoly capitalism. What do you defend? Well, for me, I start with democracy now. I start with Sister Amy. She's holding on. So at least you get some counter view, some alternative perspective on things. See, I don't believe anybody has a monopoly on truth. But some folk are more truthful than others. More truthful than Democracy Now! And Fox News and MSNBC. Fox News is just right-wing propaganda, MSNBC just neoliberal propaganda. And they're going at each other, they're dependent on each other, they're parasitic on each other. That's why you can find out more about Rush Limbaugh on MSNBC. Because they always have to show what he's saying every day in order to respond. And don't realize it's just neoliberal propaganda, parasitic on the right-wing propaganda. Where is the larger context? Concerned about justice and poor people in the prison industrial complex and Wall Street, drones dropping bombs on innocent people, massive surveillance, hardly anyone in the mainstream. Black Agenda Report is something I like to read with Brother Glenn Ford and the others. Counterpunch, very important, I like to read. What else do I like to read? Common Dreams, if I'm not too sleepy. Something that I like to read. Now, Sister Klein, Naomi Klein's work is very important. Noam Chomsky is very important. I want to move toward progressive liberals, Paul Krugman, 1 out of 3 articles. I love my brother, but I'm not a liberal. I'm a revolutionary Christian. So I'm very critical of the liberal.
I'm not.
How would you characterize yourself?
I'm really sentimental about white liberals.
About white liberals?
Yeah, I really like them.
Oh, they can be dangerous, I'm telling you.
No, I
You get the
can
fox
handle
over the white liberal, oh Lord have mercy.
I can handle it.
You need a little Holy Ghost too.
I think you take in your news or your whatever from a range of sources now. Anywhere from Friends, Twitter, Times. I still look at the New York Review of Books and the New Yorker. I think that those days of Walter Cronkite and the national narrative are gone. You know, blame Reagan for everything.
But it's hard.
I think when, you know, under the deregulation of capital, something happened. And people started to see that if they can get away from it, get away with it, then I should get away with it too. And it kept going till the whole thing sort of unraveled. That, you know, no one was willing to be the fool. That everyone wanted to get his, go around. And that people are in some ways very distrustful or think I can only do so much, and beyond that I can't go. I think that our reach and our social imagination are not the same.
Yeah.
I'd like to help you, but I can't.
Well, I do look forward to being in dialogue with my dear brother Bob Avakian. We're going to have a good time because he's got much to say. He is the real thing in terms of trying to be honest, even given my disagreements that I have with him. But we have to keep in mind, it was under Reagan that 1,000 people went to jail as a result of the savings and loans catastrophe. But how many went to jail under the Wall Street catastrophe of 2008? Zilch. But that's a decline in morality. That's a sign. And when they get caught, what do? They get charged money.
Negotiated settlement.
Tax write-off, negotiated settlement. That's no accountability at all. You never say you did it. No responsibility. Write a check. Can you imagine engaging in a crime? You and I, well, I wouldn't want to get you in trouble. But you and I commit a crime and we call the folk up and say, well, we got some big money. Offers a friend. She got some money. She's going to help me out. I don't have to go to jail. No, the legal system doesn't operate like that. That's big money dictating. That's Wu-Tang Clan creed. You got cash root and everything around me, right? That's a decline of morality. A crypto-fascist regime. Well, big money gets away with murder, regulates those very tightly who would constitute forms of resistance. With an emaciated public fear, there's no public conversation. With no serious public education, so you're not going to get any Socratic energy. There's no critical engagement at all. You're generating sleepwalkers and consumers. What is that? Well, that is what you call soft fascism. And when you do try to engage in serious critique and resistance, as the Occupy movement did here in New York City, it was a marvelous thing, I thought. You get brutalized. Now, people say, oh, well, that's what Sheldon Wolin, of course, needs to be invoked here. He's probably the most important theorist of democracy in the last 50 years in America. And he's already talked about the soft fascism and the kind of totalitarian tendencies of unaccountable political power, unaccountable economic power. The deregulation of markets went hand in hand with what? the degradation of workers, the fracturing and the fissuring of working organizations, so the working people feel more and more helpless, impotent. They can't fight the bosses and the powers that be. Traditionally, that was one of our counter forces against greed at the top. So what else is possible? You got rebellion. That's not revolution. We got rebellion. And you got right-wing populism. I mean, people used to say on the left, we were coming along in the 60s, America needs a revolution. America only has the capacity for counter-revolution. I used to travel the country with Michael Harrington. He's my dear brother, Democratic Socialist, part of the legacy of Eugene Debs. We were reminded at every election that for every socialist in America, you probably got at least 15 members of the Ku Klux Klan. That's counter-revolution. I get calls all the time. You got over 1,000 white supremacist militia groups. They say, Brother West, you on the list of all of them. People ask me why I'm a Christian. I need some spiritual strength, guys. No, I'm being facetious. But I mean, the point is that the right wing, organized right wing, with guns, serious. And that's why these 6 figures that we talked about, that I talk about in this book, each and every one of them either had a bounty on their head, were killed, were murdered, or knew they'd be murdered any minute. Because when you tell the truth about society in terms of white supremacy's connection to capitalism and empire, and if you constitute any kind of threat, you got fellow citizens before you can get to the police who will kill you. Because we do have a certain right-wing tilt given our history with the racism and the sexism, the homophobia, and so forth and so on. And that is sobering. So then the question becomes, well, you do it because
you can believe in social progress, social justice, that it can happen. That here is a structure where everyone can sort of make that attempt.
some possibility.
Yeah, some possibility. Can't live without hope.
Oh, no, I agree.
Can't.
Well, we have to find what hope is. You see, hope is
Not letting them win.
not letting them in. Or I would say it's a little less than that. More with Chekhov than with the romantics here.
No, full out requirement.
Oh, no, I think actually.
Oh, and until I read your book, I didn't realize how much Frederick Douglass was interested in violence.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Based on your time in Ferguson,
Yes.
they've got to come up with, they're either going to indict this officer or not.
That's right.
What is the plan if there is no indictment? Was that discussed at all? Is there a plan about that? Is there a next step? Because it looks like it's going in the direction of no indictment, if it's justified, and so forth and so on.
There were a number of different views that you can imagine. There was no consensus reached. There was certainly a sense that there would be a certain kind of explosion. And see, for me, as a Coltranean, in the sense of John Coltrane's love supreme, that love is non-negotiable. So your rage has to be filtered through love and justice, not hatred and revenge. But that is said, more easily said than done, when such perceived gross injustice takes place. But those voices of love and justice must be in the mix. Because even the rage taking the form of hatred and revenge just reproduces the same kind of hatred, revenge, domination, and so on. But there was a sense that going to explode. The question is then, how do you try to channel that rage in such a way that it's much more constructive than destructive? But that's going to be tough. And that's not just Ferguson. That's every city in America.
That's what I'm thinking.
Ferguson is a national
Fallout, yes.
phenomenon.
Domino.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I appreciate that question.